So, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, good. I'll do my best not to trail off. So thank you for being here. Today I'm going to talk about CX, Fuel Healing. This is where you guys can laugh. Oh, well. So, thank you. And just talk about solutions and sort of quick wins and then more involved things for one of the lesser represented classes of Drupal users. I'll go ahead and get the obligatory introductions out of the way. My name is Adrian Rollett. I'm the technical director at Blue Spark. If you're drinking a delicious hot beverage today, you're welcome. And it's almost 7 years now that I've been inflicting Drupal on poor, unsuspecting content creators. So definitely a lot of strides been made over the years, but there's a lot we can do. And so just want to talk about some of those things. I'd like this to be at least somewhat interactive, and I'd like to hear some honest answers and try not to think, play to the test knowing what the presentation's about. But who's upmost in your mind when you're thinking about architecting or building Drupal sites?
I'm in education, so I think of teachers and parents.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're building what kind of sites?
Anything from internal internet type sites for the staff to information for the parents.
Okay. And so you're really focused on those people who the content's for, that you're delivering information to. Anyone else? You're sitting there, you're trying to think, okay, what does this site need to do? Who are we focused towards? Who do you think of?
University students, university instructors, and actually authors of textbook-like content.
Okay. And so, remote will work for me. It's a pity. It's my contention that for a lot of sites, especially for brochure-type sites, content-driven, content-heavy, this stuff a lot of us build, then you have the end users. These are the people, this is sort of where the money's going, where we're trying to get eyeballs on content and so on. But the true users of the site are really the people that day in and day out have to get on and actually edit that content, add new content. And it's almost never the people that build the site. They don't have a lot of familiarity. And so it's easy to get stuck. And I'd really like for the phone to work, but oh well. Technology. What are you going to do? So if we're going to solve problems, we need to understand them, right? And so I really want to do some serious thinking about this and walk through with you guys. And so let's start with sort of a respected expert on the subject matter. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Drupal information minister, but it's kind of it's funny because it's true stuff and hurts a little sometimes, but it is what it is. And
Correlation positive and negative.
That's the question. You beat me to it. Should we really have said inversely? But yeah, well done. So on a slightly more serious note, who hasn't seen interfaces like this, especially sort of old school custom CMSs? Someone got let loose with PHP and it got really rough really quickly. Names have been hidden to protect the guilty. Right? Don't actually know what CMS this is, but we've all seen stuff like this. But we really want to have a higher goal than just we're programmers, there's some metadata that needs to be filled in, let's give someone a field and move on. If all we're going to do is sort of map web pages to database fields, we might as well install PHP MyAdmin and be done with it, right? Like, here you go. So there's sort of three major sections in the talk. The first is to just talk about some quick wins, particularly for site builders. You can drop this module in, and it's really going to improve things for you. And so individually, often the effect is small, just a little piece, but the sum of the parts can add up to be really an easier and more pleasant experience. So those of you, I hope everyone just that was in the keynote, and by the way, it's pretty lame for me to get to follow Larry and Jeff, but it is what it is. We deal and move on. But if you remember the section about the new administration toolbar, there's the Navbar module, which is out there for Drupal 7, and it gives you the same thing. It'll go horizontal or vertical. It's responsive. It has these nice little visual cues for what you're looking for. And so it's been backported from the Spark project to Drupal 7. It uses an icon library. We've added our own custom menu items to this and gone ahead and added icons, and it keeps a nice look and feel. Prepopulate is one I like to use on a lot of different projects, and what that does is let you pre-fill form fields, like for instance on node fields or even web forms, with just a URL query. And what that does for us, we can take advantage of context, where the user's coming from. Say they're on the events page, the content creator, and looking at a certain category, let's say exhibitions. And we can really, really easily give them an add a new exhibition button that'll take you to the new event, to the add event content page, and we'll pre-fill that form field for them. It won't be locked. We're not going to restrict people and keep them from using it any way they want, but we're going to save time and effort. So this is a really quick, easy example. This is how you can do this. It's a link. You theme it up, and for someone with the correct permissions, you can use panels and add a little add event button right on the events page. Sort of some of the same ideas. We're talking about doing some editing in place. They're in Drupal 8. Again, there are philosophical arguments to be had, but thought through. If you do that, then you can really make nice experiences for content creators. Another module that's nice is conditional fields. It can manage dependencies between fields. The classic thing, you're filling out a form. If the user clicks yes on a radio, then you add a couple of new questions. The guiding principle we think about when we're building sites is let's really reduce cognitive load, make things as simple as possible, only put in front of users things they need to see. And so that's a nice thing. If you're familiar with the States API, if you're a developer, then conditional fields is a module that's an interface to that and lets you set it up as configuration. You can save yourself a little bit of modulitis. If you're already writing a custom module, you can go ahead and throw in a form alter and set that up with States API. Another nice one to use is the module called Link It. And so it's like here we are in the year 2014, and really with a default site setup, we're telling users, okay, here's the way to link to some content on your site. You go, you search for it through the content interface, which is its own little piece we'll talk about later. Go find it and copy and paste a link. This is so easy to drop in that there's really no excuse for making users do that kind of hunting. And so it'll search through content. You can also include configuration with global redirect, and there's another module which escapes me. But basically make sure you're always using relative URLs so your content remains agnostic about what server it's on or if it's even under a subdirectory. And just doing a little managing and keeping, saving users from themselves. Another nice one, and Courtney, this might look familiar to you. We're building and launching soon the Indiana University Library site. And so references dialog is really nice improvement to usability for reference content, for letting content know about other content. And so instead of, we've all seen the start typing in a title, if you can remember it, an autocomplete. It does several things for you. The first thing is what we're seeing here in the screenshot, which is that you can literally build a view and stick that in, And that's what users use to look for content instead of hoping we can remember a title. So it's completely customizable. You can add filters. You can theme it up, make it look good. Next thing you can do, and this is all configurable. You can use any of the three pieces. You can search for content this way, and you can also edit or even create content in place. I built a little site for myself to track rebates that I've submitted. And so I have a reference to the vendor. And so instead of having to get halfway through filling a form, realizing, oh, crud, I've got to go open another tab and add this vendor, which I've never done before, you literally just, from the reference field, create it, and then there you go. You're not taken out of context. You don't end up with 3 tabs, 4 tabs, 5 tabs to build a single piece of content. So this is a really nice one. It's worth looking into. Next, we have use bulk operations. We also heard about that from Larry and Jeff. It's a really good one. So who here has built a site and the default content interface is perfect for the users, right? It helps them find exactly what they're looking for, doesn't make them wade through a bunch of pages. Yeah, I thought so. So, it's so easy, there's no excuse not to, right? You're 90, probably 102% likely you're using views on the project anyway. It's worth spending, say, 30 minutes and thinking through what kind of content are users looking for, or content creators. Is it really the most recent content, or can we do intelligent things? A fun little anecdote, I was on a call with my colleague Cecily with a new client, and they were saying, the site works for us, but there are things we can't even figure out how to do. We can't figure out how to keep up with stale content. We don't even know how to find what hasn't been touched. And I was literally able to hop on their site and build a view that just displayed content that with an updated date more than a year ago. Give them the operations like they were used to on the usual content screen, and after a couple minutes of vamping, say, look, here, go here, you're ready to go. And so it's good to think this through ahead, and then you want to listen afterwards, right? Talk to people, find out how they're using it, find out what's hard. A lot of times you can solve those problems really easily. Another nice one, if you have a site that's really heavily menu-driven, particularly if the architecture is even all one menu or a few menus, this does a lot of nice things. The content menu module, users are able to publish and unpublish content right from the menu. We actually use this module sort of as a centerpiece for a Drupal 7 site that actually provided thousands of sitelets for health coaches for a company called Integrative Nutrition. And so when a new health coach logged on, they'd get this interface. It was themed up a bit more, but the basic idea was there. They had some pre-filled content there ready for them. They might just have a default homepage published, and they could go and see, okay, here's my bio page. I'm going to edit that. When it's ready, just hit right here. And I don't have to know, okay, there's menus, and I can move content around there. And then there's the content listing or the edit page, and I have to go find the content there to publish it. Instead, it's all in one place. So depending on your needs, this can really be a nice one. So this next one might be one of my more controversial suggestions. A lot of people are into panels. Some people are like, it's just really too much stuff. I have to say, we've drunk the Kool-Aid. We use it everywhere. But even if you have concerns, and there are valid concerns depending on what kind of site you're building about performance on the front end, then it's potentially perfectly acceptable to use it. It really can make it easy to alter note forms, things like that. Again, I'm leaning a lot on what Larry and Jeff talked about, but there's really some nice stuff coming in Drupal 8. And it's literally, once you've done it once or twice, the work of 30 minutes to set up a node form. So it's really more like that Drupal 8 interface, where you just have the really important stuff, the content, the body, maybe some tags in the main area. And anything else, it's off to the side. It's not causing a lot of mental effort to figure out, oh, what is this? When someone decides they need it, they can go and look for it. So it's easy to columnize layouts and stick form fields in. So again, we just really want to think about eliminating the unnecessary. Let's reduce cognitive load. Let's just do a little thinking.
You talked about using panels to edit the node edit form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, literally, you can take it using Page Manager. You can take over the edit form either for all content types or individually using context. Not the context module, but context within panels. If there's one of many, but if there's one problem Drupal really has, it's overloading terms, right? So that's been the section about sort of site building modules. Drop this in, it's going to make your life easier, or you can do a little configuration and set it up. Next, we're going to talk about modifications to the default Drupal interface. Things we can go in. Some things are really geared in the interface not towards content creators and the people who use a site for its 90% of its life cycle, but sort of us, the people who are building the sites out. And that's great for us, not so helpful for customers or end users. So we have a lot of little minor things we like to do. We sort of keep them in our toolbox. We use them where it's appropriate. So here's a really good example of what I'm talking about with things being geared towards site builders, and that's the contextual links, the little gear. So if I'm building the site out, this is awesome. I don't have to remember, okay, what did I call this? View, scroll through. There's a Freudian slip for you. Scroll through 20, 30, 40 different views and try and remember what it's called. I just click the gear and hey, I go straight to the view. I can make a tweak. Maybe I need to add a filter to it or something. That's awesome. For content creator, it's confusing and unnecessary. It's worse than having nothing there at all. They might be thinking, okay, I could add a new network from right here. Wah, 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 wah. No, you can't, right? You can just do something that they probably have no context for or need to do. So we have this nice hook. It's Contextual Links View Alter. And we can use that to go ahead and change these links. So I like to go in and get rid of the edit view link. That's not helpful. And for instance here, someone might be wanting to add another network. And so we just create a link to the node add form. So just really want to think about what's useful. And this is another thing, again, on the panels theme. We tend to build a lot of home pages and landing pages using panels in Page Manager. We'll drop in beans or pieces of content. And so there might be a view that shows some promotional content blocks or beans. And again, it's not helpful there to edit the view. They're not trying to change which ones get pulled in, but they probably do want to add a new one or edit one of the existing ones. So that's a nice use. So here's a really basic example. I was at a million forms on any Drupal site, and some are already pretty nice. But so how many content types are there on the average site you build? 8, 10, something like that often. Sometimes it's way more, but you might have done a poor job architecting if you have, say, 80. just at a guess. Of those 8 or 10 content types, how many actually use the promoted to front page or sticky at the top of list checkboxes? 0. Yeah, we don't use them a lot either, right? And so they show up by default. It's there. It comes with Drupal. That's great. But if we're not using it, we're just confusing users. It's just, it You know, it takes us 30 seconds. We've got it in our snippet library. Just take them out, kill it with fire, get rid of it. It's not helpful. Another, it's a recurring theme, panels, panelizer. We like to use panelizer on certain builds. Again, to reduce content type itis. It may be that one content type in a selection of layouts will do the same job that multiple content types will do with less confusion. And so on the selection form for the layout, then we'll take and put in a screenshot. This is for the American Astronomical Society. We'll put in an icon that's relevant, it's themed right, and it's going to instantly make sense. Oh, this is the layout I'm looking for, and I don't have to remember that 3 call bricks is something that makes sense to a human being. So it's the, picture's worth 1,000 words. So a little theming can go a long ways. We built a site over this summer and this fall for TripAdvisor. And it's a very content-driven site, content-heavy, and nearly every post they write is translated into 20-plus languages. And we started hearing that they were getting confused and didn't know what language they were on. They were trying to add a translation, and maybe you click on, okay, add Japanese translation. You go off and look for the actual stuff, and there's another tool we built that helped this, but at first it was literally copying and pasting translations. And by the time you get back, you maybe don't even remember where you were, and they were getting sort of the wrong things in the wrong places, and said, hey, can you just give us a really big red button? And I said, yeah, we can do that. That's really easy. Sorry, So how easy is it just to, and we went a little further. We added the drop button for the language switcher, because before what they had was just literally a select menu kind of buried between the title and the main node form. Not easy to see. We put it in a more prominent place. We made it red and made it easy for them to understand what they were in the middle of. So, and there's a certain unintentional arrogance that can come out as developers, and you just think, well, we know how to do this, and how hard is it to remember I clicked on, add Japanese translation to get to this page. Really want to make as few assumptions as possible and be there for people. So we've talked about modules you can drop in. We've talked about sort of little pieces of code, little pieces of theming you can do and improve the situation. And I want to sort of round things out by showing a couple of custom interfaces we've built, and with just really the workflow and ease of use for content creators in mind. And so these are definitely higher effort type things, but if we can listen to people, spend some development time and save, it's easy to imagine doing something that's going to save someone half an hour a day. That's a big chunk of your life you get back, not clicking between various forms to accomplish something. So this is something we built for Integrative Nutrition. It's a custom interface for dealing with which items are featured on the homepage. A lot of times in the there's a module for that approach, and we'll think like, okay, we've got a list of stuff, we want to reorder it. That sounds like a node queue and a view. But that's fine, that works, that's functional, but you end up going a lot of different places to accomplish what's really one task. And we may think, oh, well, there's the task of adding content, that's one thing. Then there's rearranging it. Then there's getting rid of stuff or deciding just not to show more than 4 things. But that's sort of more developer-y thinking, right? Their ideas, I want to deal with choosing which content is on the homepage. And so we built this interface. It would come up directly from the homepage and easy to drag and drop. And another thing we've started trying to do a lot with, we're sort of in its, as far as us as a company, we're still in the infancy and working on it. But getting data about content in front of content creators so they can make useful decisions about it. And so you see, you can sort of say, you know, what's hot right now? This has been on this site for 2 days. Is it still getting, you know, eyeballs on it, or is it really tailing off? And not have to, so we don't tell someone, well, you see, you cruise over to Google Analytics and you dive in and try and remember the URL and dig through, and maybe after a while you can make a decision. Let's really try and enable that all in one place. If you're interested in things like that, I'd encourage you to look at Piwik. I mean, obviously, Google Analytics is the 500-pound gorilla in the space, and there are various APIs, but for one thing, it's your data in someone else's system, and I think anyone who's been around for a year or two knows how often Google changes their APIs and even closes them off. And so you're really trying to hit a moving target. Piwik is very nice. It's a statistics package and tracker that really is kind of like open source Google Analytics that you control. A lot of people working on it doing nice things. It's got a PHP API, both pure PHP functions that you can pull in as a library and a web services API. So really a lot of ways to work with it. And like I said, we're just scratching the surface of what can be done, but we're seeing some really nice possibilities. And that's, if you're interested in looking at it, it's PIWIK. I think it's piwik.org is where to find more information. Or type it into the mighty Google. We can minimize our dependence, but we're not going to get rid of it for a long time, right? So to actually build this interface, a big part of what I used was draggable views and the flag module and flag weights. So flag, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It just makes a nice way to choose content. You can do it right from a piece of content. You don't have to. With the node queue example, it would be like click on the node queue tab on a node and drill down and add it, and then go edit the node queue. It's just literally just click on the node like, hey, I want to feature this on the home page. And flag has a nice set of hooks that you can use. And in this case, we used it to figure out, to actually drop things out and prevent users from adding more pieces of content than they should. So you don't get into confusion. Well, I've added 6 pieces. Which ones are supposed to show? So if you've used flag weights with Drupal 7, the 3 branch, you're welcome. We ported that as part of this project. And so this is a sort of custom dashboard we built for Indiana University libraries. And what they have, sort of their particular challenge. And when I say we, I can't use the royal we, it's my colleague Cecily, put in a whole lot of the legwork on this. And sort of the particular problem they were solving is they have a whole bunch of different groups. And so each subject area has, you know, their own sort of area of the site, their own little kingdom, and they add content. And they have people that are responsible for multiple areas and so on. And we use organic groups to manage some of the permissions, the actual segmenting, and so on. But the problem you have, you go to a standard content listing, and there are literally thousands of pieces of content, and it's like hitting the lottery if you see one that's relevant to you on just a listing of recent content. So we want to get in front of people. The default view is content they've created. They can also filter it down by group. If you're the admin of 10 groups, then you're probably going to work on African studies at one time. So you can narrow that down. You can look at either content that you've literally created or content that you have access to edit. And so if you have people under you, you can filter by workflow states, so you can look quickly at everything I have permission to edit that needs approval, something like that. And so the workflow module provides a lot of stuff like this, and sort of took it and ran with it. Again, we're trying to get statistics in front of users. I wish I had a current example. I want I say that we're still getting into this, then this stuff is, I think, ready but not live. Again, just try and get the information that's relevant to decision making in front of users, but only that information. That's really what we're after. So another thing we built, I alluded to this earlier, for TripAdvisor, they've got this site, and it's the TripAdvisor for Business side of their organization. And it's super content heavy. Each post is translated into over 20 languages, including Korean, Japanese, Chinese, different scripts, Cyrillic, Russian, and it was a huge amount of effort for them to be editing this content, adding it, getting all the translations in, trying to proof it, making sure the right translation went with the right piece of content. It's pretty important. You don't want to have an end user, a browser, feel devalued because they're seeing a picture that obviously has nothing to do with the content or the title they're looking at. I feel like someone didn't make an effort here. So we built a tool that actually automates all this, and TripAdvisor has an internal dashboard that then interfaces with the external service providers. And so we interfaced with that. If that hadn't been part of the equation, there are a couple of really nice packages out there. There's one called Translation Management Tools. I think it's TGMT is the project name on Drupal.org. And that interfaces with a number of different backends, including one that the people behind that tool have built, I believe. And again, the idea is that you can just send a translation out and choose a service. And there's a whole spectrum of services. Some are really top end. You have translators that are only allowed to translate into their native language, but of course there's going to be a cost premium. You can pick between those. Another tool that's around is Lingotech. I believe they're presenting today. And we did look heavily at translation management tools, but in the end we would have had to reinvent the wheel too much. But again, the basic idea is we build this tool from a node, then users can submit a request to have content translated. They can pick which languages it's supposed to go into. And they can send off comments to the translators to give them context on what they're seeing. And it really saves a lot of mistakes and a lot of effort. And so that's a few of our custom tools. I guess I don't hear anyone clamoring for an encore, but I'm going to inflict one more thing on you anyway. So, one more question. What's the single most annoying thing about the Drupal admin interface? Any takers? Say what?
With or without admin.
Admin menu?
Well,
With or without it.
Oh, either way. Just out of the box. Over the, yeah. Well, and that's not even something I mentioned. I suppose it's so default to our process. The first thing we do on a build is disable overlay.
we'd be
So,
finding where a link could be 3 levels deep in the admin or something.
oh yeah, all the drilling down. Okay, well, this is rigged. I have my own horse in the race. One of the things I find really frustrating is just the speed, right? Like this laptop, it's what, a quad core. It's probably faster than 10 of NSA's Craze in the 90s, right? And it's still, it can take 3-4 seconds to load the modules page locally, to say nothing of when you add network latency into the equation. And so it was something, sort of a side project I've been working on a little. And there are 2 ways of attacking this, right? We can really try and profile things. We can really dig deep in the code, submit issues to Drupal.org, say, look, I think we could shave 3 microseconds off of the content page load if we, optimized here or compiled to C. That's not much fun. I prefer dirty tricks. And so what I came across, and actually Greg Dunlap, Hey Rocker, if any of you have heard of him, he ran the configuration management initiative for Drupal 8. He tweeted out something he'd run across, which I really liked the notion of, and it's called Instant Click. And it's what it is at its core is a JavaScript library. And the guy who wrote it realized, hey, anytime you go and you hover over a link, that you usually have at least 200, 300, 400 milliseconds before that link is actually clicked. If we preload in the background, then then the perception when you click is that if you can load the page in those 300 or 400 milliseconds or close to it, then you have a perception of instantaneous page loads, which is really, really nice. And you can imagine that it goes a lot beyond sort of CX and could be really nice for the front end of various sites. And there are caveats. One of them, the most obvious, being that you're putting more load on your server because it's not a guarantee that a user is going to click on every link that they hover over. So you have to do some thinking about your situation. And so I don't always demo, but when I do it live. And this is the part where I didn't mirror my screen, so I have to look up there. Okay, so this is a pretty vanilla Drupal site. And looking at the front end, and I've just set this up on the back end, and so the Drupal module, it's at Drupal.org project instant click, and it integrates this JavaScript library, which is still under heavy development, but it's already really pretty neat. And you have some capability. You can blacklist paths if you find they just don't work with instant click. I still haven't had luck with making it work along with CK Editor, for instance. But click, and it's like, bam! This is awesome. I really think it's a really nice improvement to just the ease of use of the site. And so that's about it. That's what I've got. Any questions I can answer?
Yeah, I have a nasty thing. This seems to me, let's say content type A with an editing reference to content type B.
Mm-hmm.
And you want someone to be able to edit A as they're going through, like they need a new B. So click something to create a new select an already existing B and make that fast.
Yeah, that's the references dialog. Yeah, and so what that looks like is that you're editing content type A, as you said, and you realize you need a new B. Instead of going over into another tab or losing your work, from the field, you get a little pop-up, and it says, search, add, edit.
Okay.
And you can click add, and the node add form for content type B comes up in a modal, so you don't lose your state.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
To try that. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. It's a nice one. Yes, sir.
Have you ever used inline entity form module?
I've heard of it. I have not used it myself. I don't think. Field collections solves a somewhat similar use case, not as flexibly, but for the case of grouping fields and editing them within a parent node, then it does that pretty nicely.
I was just wondering if there was how much of a difference between that and references that one you were talking about, because they seem to solve the same types of problems.
They probably do. My guess, not having used it, is that inline entity reference would be for more tightly coupled relationships where you have a node and it's always going to have metadata in it that you've chosen to store in another content type.
Yeah.
Whereas references dialog is a little looser. You can use it for fields of unlimited cardinality. I mean, if you want to reference 20 nodes using that that works. I don't know what that looks like within line editing reference. So I would look really closely and pick the one that seems to solve the problem best. Yes, sir.
For me, a really basic one that I don't know if you mentioned, but I know there's some modules out there. I'm just curious what your preferred solution is the publishing and unpublishing of content.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the default way in Drupal I find to be just unnecessarily confusing for an editor, so I always try to give it
Sort of check
a little easier way.
I do like that the approach of content menu that I showed. I really only showed one screen, so it's not in depth. But it's a nice, sort of one click. You're looking at content where it's laid out in the site. If you're using menu for the architecture, and you click to publish, click to unpublish. And obviously, if you have a more complex workflow where people have to go through revisions or drafts, then that's not going to work as well. I mean, you could use it to just decide whether the current revision is live or not. Go ahead.
If there's not a workflow module specifically set up, there's a nice little module called Unpublish.
Right, that's the one I've used.
Yeah, it works well for sort of simpler workflows.
What does that do?
It gives you permissions to allow users to literally publish or unpublish contents
Oh.
without having to have Workbench or Workflow installed.
And that's all they can. That they don't.
That's all it addresses.
Right. Okay, but that's still useful.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for your attention and time.